This video is meant to accompany the Reporting Psychological Investigations booklet that you'll find on the BPS website. That obviously goes into a lot more detail. This is just a quick run through. So, in most specifications, you need to understand what a psychological investigation report looks like, and you might be required to write up certain sections of it. So just some general tips first of all. It must be written up in the style of a scientific report, which means it must be written in the third person, passive, which means past tense, and don't say I or we. It should be concise, objective and precise because it is a scientific report, and it has to have the following sections. So obviously a title, contents page, abstract, introduction, procedure, results, discussion, references and appendices. So let's start with an abstract. So this is a brief summary of the entire investigation. It appears at the beginning of the report, but you actually write it last once you've finished. If you imagine if you're going to choose a novel to read, you might read the blurb on the back of the book to see if it's something that interests you. And it's exactly the same with scientific reports. You read the abstract to see if it's of interest to you. So it'll have a very brief summary, very brief details of the participants, details of the procedure, results, and finally the conclusion. But it is, as we said, very, very brief because it's only 100 to 150 words. The introduction. So that starts with a literature review of relevant background research. And once you've finished reviewing the research that's relevant to what you're doing, the next part is the aim, and the aim should proceed logically from the psychological literature that you've reviewed. And of course the hypotheses, so the prediction of what you're expecting to happen, and the null hypotheses should appear there. The procedure then. This section has 4 subsections, and it should be detailed so that somebody can exactly replicate your study. Think of a recipe. If you just gave someone the ingredients, they wouldn't be able to replicate your cake. They need detailed instructions of exactly what to do. So the first section is the design and overview. So that will explain, along with justification, your research method. So is it an experiment, self-report, correlation, observation, etc. The research design, so independent measures, repeated measures design, correlation. The variables, now if you've done an experiment, that would be the independent and the dependent variable. If you've done a correlation, it will be covariables. And you also need to talk about how you will control any of those extraneous variables that might pop up and prevent them from becoming confounding variables. And here you'll also talk about the ethics of your research. So you'll talk about getting informed consent, giving a debrief, protection from harm, confidentiality, etc. The next part of your procedure is participants and investigators. So you will talk about whether the investigator is just yourself or whether it's a small group of your peers. And the investigators are named in the research, unlike the participants who need to be anonymous. So you'll talk about your sampling technique. How did you gather your participants? How many did you have? How many are in each condition? And how were they allocated to those conditions? Remember though that participants need to be anonymous and no details that could identify them should be used. You'll then talk about your apparatus. So what did you need to use in your research? So anything like questionnaires, word lists, stopwatches, etc. The final part of the procedure is your detailed account of exactly what you did. This needs to be very detailed and it needs to go from start to finish. You need to talk about pilot studies, designing your stimulus material, and you should refer the reader to the appendices for things like standardised instructions, debriefs, copies of materials. Anything that you mention in your procedure should be in the appendices. Results then. So there's 2 sections to the results, descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. So you might want to include a table of results, graphs, measures of central tendency, mean, median or mode, measures of dispersion, standard deviation, interquartile range or the range. Remember though to put a brief sentence or brief paragraph under any tables or graphs to explain your results. What do they show? And all raw data and calculations should be in the appendices. Inferential statistics, so your justification of the inferential test used. So was it a test of difference? Was it a correlation? What was your research design? What level of data did you collect? The results then should be stated in terms of rejecting or accepting the null hypotheses. And all calculations and critical value tables again need to be in the appendices. The discussion then. This is where you get to explain your findings and conclusions. So you might want to talk about any anomalies. If your research didn't support your original prediction, why not? If it did, what does it mean? You might also evaluate the research here. What are the limitations? What were the problems? What would you change if you were to repeat that research? And finally, what are the implications? So it might be real world implications, or it might be implications for further research that needs to be undertaken. The references section. So any research that you've cited in your introduction should be referenced. Any internet resources such as psychometric test questionnaires, they need to be referenced too. Include the date accessed as well as the website address. So for books, the convention is you write the author, date, title of the book in italics, the city where it was published and the publisher. So an example here, Duck S, 1992, Human Relationships, London Sage. For journal articles, author, date, title of the article in italics, title of the journal, volume number and page number. So we've got Bandura, Ross and Ross, 1961, Transmission of Aggression through Imitation of Aggressive Models, Journal of Abnormal and Social Psychology, and the journal number was 63 and the page number 375 to 382. And all references should be in alphabetical order. The final section of the report is the appendices, and anything that's not in the main report should be included here, so raw data, statistical calculations, stimulus material, etc. And each appendix should be numbered and have a full title and be referred to somewhere in the main body of the report. I hope that's clarified for you how to carry out a psychological investigation and write it up. Please don't forget to read it in conjunction with the booklet that is available on the BPS website. Thank you for your attention.